These are the notes on factors affecting reaction rates. So these notes are going to focus on something called the collision model, which basically is a model that explains our observation that the rates of reactions are affected by both concentration and temperature. So here's some of the points of this model. In order for molecules to react, they have to collide. And the greater number of collisions, the faster the rate is going to be. This is just a picture of molecules colliding, and you can see in this top picture the molecules are coming together to collide, but actually the collision is unsuccessful, and that's really what happens most of the time. But every once in a while you'll get a successful collision and you will produce new products. So it should make sense that the more molecules you have present, the greater the probability of collision, and therefore the faster the rate. The higher the temperature, the more energy is going to be available to the molecules, and the faster the rate. So the molecules will basically have more kinetic energy. As I said before, one complication is that not all collisions are going to lead to products. In fact, only a very small fraction of collisions actually lead to products. So in order for a reaction to occur, the reactant molecules have to collide with both the correct orientation and with enough energy to form products. In 1889, a Swedish chemist by the name of Svante Arrhenius developed something called the Arrhenius equation, which is just a formula for the temperature dependence of reaction rates. And it was very instrumental in determining the rates of chemical reactions and for calculating something called the energy of activation. Activation energy is just the minimum amount of energy required to initiate or start a chemical reaction. Chemical reactions require a certain amount of energy just to be successful because when molecules collide, often bonds have to be broken in order for new bonds to form new products. And that bond breaking simply requires energy. Take a look at this specific example. This molecule right here is called methyl isonitrile. And when it reacts, the atoms in that molecule can get rearranged to form something called acetonitrile, which is a molecule that's used in organic synthesis to make pharmaceuticals and pesticides and perfumes, things like that. Well, in order for this change to occur, this carbon-nitrogen bond right here has to break, and eventually this nitrogen-carbon portion here has to become perpendicular to this original methyl group, and that all takes energy to occur. So the amount of energy required for that breaking and rearranging of that, breaking of the bond and then rearrangement of that CN group is called the activation energy. Here's a diagram of the energy changes for that reaction of methyl isonitrile turning into acetonitrile. So this graph shows you the potential energy within the methyl isonitrile molecule originally and how it changes over time as that carbon-nitrogen bond breaks. That requires energy, so now the molecule's at a higher energy state. And then once that new carbon-carbon bond is formed, that releases a lot of energy and puts the new molecule acetonitrile at a much lower energy state. So this just shows you the activation energy, or the energy that's required to go from that starting material all the way up to that, what we call an activated complex, or the highest energy state in that whole reaction. You should know the difference between an exothermic reaction and an endothermic reaction. In an exothermic reaction, the energy of the products is going to be less than the energy of the reactants. So you can see that in this diagram. Here we've got the potential energy of the reactants. Compare that to the potential energy of the products. The products are at a much lower energy. So that excess energy, that difference right here, is released in the form of heat. And therefore the reaction is going to feel hot. If you're holding a container with an exothermic reaction, the heat is going to go through the container and into your hand and feel hot. This heat energy that's released has a name. It's called enthalpy, and it's represented by delta H. Endothermic reactions, in contrast, are those in which the energy of the products is more than the energy of the reactants. So once you get to this activated complex, that new bond formation actually puts the molecule at a higher energy state than the original reactants. And so energy has to be put into this system, and this reaction is going to feel cold as energy is pulled from the environment. Finally, you just need to know that catalysts also can change the rate of a chemical reaction. They'll speed it up. There's two different types of catalysts. There's homogeneous catalysts and heterogeneous catalysts. Homogeneous catalysts are such that the catalyst and the reaction occur in one phase. So here's an example. Hydrogen peroxide, you've maybe seen that in your house in a brown bottle. It actually decomposes really slowly and it just turns into water and oxygen. If you take it out of the brown bottle, it'll decompose in the presence of sunlight. But that reaction is really pretty slow. If you were to add a bromide ion to hydrogen peroxide, it will act as a catalyst and it will cause that hydrogen peroxide to very quickly decompose into water and oxygen. But one of the things I want you to notice here, if you look at all these equations, is that when I input the catalyst, the bromide ion, and react it with the hydrogen peroxide, it's going to go through a series of two reactions, but ultimately I'm going to get the bromide ion back. So catalysts are not used up in a chemical reaction. They just provide a quicker reaction pathway for the reactants to get to the products. And so generally we say that catalysts operate by lowering the activation energy for a reaction. Here's a diagram of that process. In this diagram you see the initial reaction of the uncatalyzed decomposition of hydrogen peroxide forming water and oxygen. And here you see in the blue line the catalyzed reaction. And you'll notice that the activation energy is lower. And that would be both for the forward reaction and the reverse reaction. So the reaction is just faster because it takes less energy for the reaction to proceed. In the last example, the bromide ion was a homogeneous catalyst because it was in the same state of matter as the reactant hydrogen peroxide. They were both in the aqueous phase. This slide shows an example of a heterogeneous catalyst. In a heterogeneous catalyst, the catalyst is in a different phase or different state of matter than the reactants. So what this picture shows is hydrogen atoms being bonded to some sort of an organic molecule here. So those reactants are both gases, but the catalyst itself is a piece of platinum metal, and that's a solid. So the catalyst is in a different state of matter than the two reactants, and that's what makes it heterogeneous. Here's just a couple of facts to note about enzymes. Enzymes are catalysts. They're just biological catalysts. And most enzymes are protein molecules with really large molecular masses. I'm sure you learned about these in biology. Enzymes work because they have very, very specific shapes, and it's because of their shape that they're able to catalyze very, very specific reactions. They will catalyze reactions at what we call an activation site. And in this process, the substrate will lock into an enzyme or the biological catalyst, and then a very quick reaction can occur. Maybe you remember from biology learning about proteases or enzymes that break down proteins, or carbohydrases, or enzymes that break down sugars and starches like amylase. You're not going to need to know about enzymes for your test. I just wanted to make a note about that. So that's it for the notes. I'll see you in class.